Alright, the time has come. It has been probably a minute. I am going to just do a save as, label this rig 2, and just type it. I like making notations about what I've done in each version. It makes it easier if I need to go back to figure out what the heck I'm looking for. So do that. Again, version your files. At this point, you guys are animation 2. I have way less sympathy if you've been working in one file for like 40 hours and then it gets corrupted and you lose that. You should always be saving versions, so if one file gets corrupted, you can go back to another one. But anywho, so again, we have the skeleton set up. There is like a few things that you can do to the skeleton, which is good practice to do. Honestly, I almost never do them, because I'm a bad person. I will come back to, I just sort of like circumvent it by using controllers for things, so I'll just sort of come back to that later. Probably do like a little brief in-class thing about it. I recommend you do it. It's not a thing that I will be checking for this rig, but it can potentially prevent some issues by doing that. I mostly like looking at joint rotation. So anywho, we have these controllers, or I'm sorry, what am I saying? We have a skeleton, basically just this rig. I'm hiding a body for now. We need a way to control this, because like I said before, it is absolutely terrible practice to actually keyframe joints. You pretty much, it's almost impossible to like go back to a nice T-pose if you're doing that, which is like really dangerous. It can like break a bunch of stuff. So to actually control these skeletons, we're going to attach controls onto our character. So usually that'll just be a bunch of little NURBS curves, like these little circle dudes. And generally, I will just sort of grab them and throw them in the center of joints. Ooh, what am I grouping things randomly? What am I doing? So I'll just like duplicate that, and I'll just use V to vert snap that into the center of all the joints. And pretty much just put like one in each joint. I do think it's kind of nice sometimes to like go through and like for these guys, I'll rotate them. If you press and hold J, it snaps to like increments of every 15 degrees, which is kind of nice. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I just think it makes it a little bit easier to look at, figure out like which way the joints are actually moving. So you can do that with your knees and stuff as well. I think I actually might, who knows? I think I might, who knows, I say as I start doing the thing that I am talking about maybe doing. That looks insane. Okay. This is pretty much how these are set up, or like how these are positioned is completely up to aesthetics. So it's really not the end of the world if maybe like, you know, you could, if you wanted to, you could put a controller out here. As long as the pivot is in the joint, it's not going to matter. Alright, so we have this control here. I will duplicate this, move this down, and this is going to be my pelvis controller, so I'm just going to sort of, just as a force of habit, this is sort of like control notation. I'm going to grab some control vertices and just like pop those down, and then I will sort of scale that down a little bit. This I'll just leave as the sort of ball control, and this is going to be my root control. The root control, usually I just make it like really large, and then I can just sort of like ignore it, and I honestly don't use it that much, mostly just for like raising and lowering my character. Actually that's a lie. I use the root control all the time. What am I saying? Sorry. I was thinking of the pelvis controller. So I usually make that kind of smaller. The reason I usually make the root larger is just because like it's really obvious, like this is a giant control, it will sort of control everything, if that makes sense. Again, it doesn't really functionally matter all that much, if at all. Alright, so I'm just going to hide the body. So what I said before is the pivots, it doesn't matter where the sort of ring of the control is, it's basically just like a viewer thing, but it does matter where these pivots are. So this should be centered in these joints. So press and hold D and V, just vert snap that in, and I moved like all of these, so I'm just going to go through and snap those pivots back into place. So you'll notice that like if I grab this, it rotates from the center of that little ball. Pretty much all of these do. And that is exactly what we want. We're setting this up basically like kind of like our joints where all the pivots are in the joints. Otherwise it'll sort of drag the joint really crazily through space. Oh yes, I was looking for, okay. I'm actually gonna keep that hidden. All right, so we have I usually just sort of go ahead and just set up a bunch of joints and call it a day. I'm going to leave the clavicle joint sort of bent slightly, and then I'm going to unbend the shoulder joint. And again, that's purely just sort of an aesthetic thing that I just kind of like. So there are nicer ways, or like sort of prettier ways, I guess, that you can do controllers. You can make little cubes. I'll show you how to do that in like 2 seconds. Frankly, I kind of just, like, I'm not really planning on animating with this rig outside of demonstrations. So if it's slightly less convenient to use, I kind of don't care to an extent. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time making like crazy fancy controllers for this rig. I will just sort of grab these. So again, this is just literally just me populating this with controls. Probably not the most interesting thing to watch. Do I want to show you the controller thing? I kind of do. All right, so for the clavicle, I like my clavicles to be sort of rotated because it makes it, if you think of your actual clavicle, it is rotating. Usually it, if this character had a collarbone, which theoretically would be maybe like around here, this doesn't really make sense in terms of the shoulder location now that I look at it, but the clavicle will be rotating from this center point here. So it kind of rotates on like this weird arc, which is why I actually like setting this up as this sort of strange little arc, because it potentially can just sort of make animating easier. So one thing you can do is, I'm just going to put this in a group, do modify, okay, where is it? Modify center pivot, and that way the group will be centered. I'm just going to go ahead and actually zero out all of this nonsense. Great. Okay, and then select the group itself, and, oh my god, modify center pivot. I did this in a weird order. Alright, so take the group itself, make sure that all the pivots and everything are set to basically the origin, and snap that up to the clavicle. Hide the body just to make sure that's actually on the clavicle. And it's totally not, which is why it's always a good idea to check. And then what I'm going to do is just rotate this group, and I will just leave the group here. It'll have rotation on it, that's fine, but you'll notice the controller is now in local space, so it has no rotation on it, but if we're working in the sort of the object orientation for rotation, it'll get that nice sort of rotation, so we don't need to do a lot of crazy stuff to get it to behave the way that we want. Again, totally optional for robots. For humans, I think it makes everything like a bajillion times easier. Clav offset. I spelled offset wrong. Clav. And some people will do like right clav control. Or like for the joints, they'll name it like right clav joint. I've never found that to be necessary or useful. If you're having trouble differentiating, there's different icons in the outline, or like the joint or the control looks different than a joint, which looks different than, you know, a piece of geometry. And if that doesn't make it clear, then like the fact that it's a completely different object in the viewport hopefully would. So do that if you want. Again, it's certainly not something I'm requiring because I pretty much never do that. I think it's really annoying actually. So yeah. Just gonna continue populating these, probably like one of the most boring things that you've ever watched. Feel free. I'm probably just gonna kind of like ramble a little bit while I talk. I might occasionally have like useful nuggets of something to say, but this is literally just sort of me populating joints. I'm going to shamelessly ignore the shoulders for now because I have absolutely no idea how I want to do those. And by shoulders, sorry, I mean the jaw joints. Again, that's me just being incredibly indecisive. So I will make this enormous head controller, which looks totally insane, but I'm okay with that. I like insane controllers for insane robots. Once again, just make sure that you snap that pivot back into the head, and alright. Cool, so I think I actually have all of my controllers in for a basic FK setup. One thing, I think I'm gonna break FK and IK, I think, into separate videos, just because I can. All right. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So one thing I usually do is, just to make my life easier, I'm actually going to recolor these curves. And I did actually, before I do that, I did promise you a video about making a square controller. So if you do want a square controller, make a cube. There's a few different ways to do this. You can do it with a cube, I think that's easier, or you can do it with the grid. Either way, create curve tool, see if your curve tool, tools. Set this to linear, don't do 2 or 3, it's basically like hard angles whenever you put a line down. And what you're going to do is just turn on, or press and hold down V for vert snapping, and just draw along this cube. You will have to overlap lines, that's totally fine. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. I think I've missed this one down here, but that should be a completed weird little box. So right now we have this like insane little NURBS box. And if you want to, mess with the control vertices, you can do that and break it apart. But a lot of times for FK setups, people will take these and they'll make like nice little boxes to sort of fit around their legs. Same thing with the arms. I usually ignore that for fingers because it's just a whole lot of extra work. But you can make whatever weird shaped controllers you want. If you were so inclined, you could make a controller that was like a really angry whatever the heck this shape is. And this is completely acceptable as a controller. They don't need to be closed. Shape is, again, completely irrelevant. It's literally just something for you to click on that will pivot around whatever the pivot is set to and control your joints. So like I said, pretty much do whatever you want in terms of shaping. Just make sure that the pivots are centered in your joints or wherever you want this to actually rotate from. All right. Recoloring curves. Select a curve you want to recolor. Go into your attribute editor, object display. There's actually a bunch of stuff that's kind of cool here, which I learned about my freshman year because I put 2 million polys worth of strawberries in a scene like an idiot. So you can turn off the visibility in your viewport if you want to. That's like, it's not the visibility in your channel box. It's like a separate, super aggressive override. I think you can actually hide this. No, I'm curious. Yeah, ooh, that's handy. I never actually tried that before. So here's a fun thing. If you want to automatically turn your controllers off, turn this on and it will automatically hide them when you play through your outliner. So there's a bunch of other random stuff. Here's like options for ghosting if you want to sort of get a preview of where your object has been. We want if you have a really, that's a different thing, sorry. All right, so recoloring, again, attribute editor, object display, drawing overrides, just click enable overrides, and you should be able to, again, do some weird stuff with like visibility if you want, play black, whatever. But what you can do is actually go through and change the color of this. So like if I make this strange peach color, if I click off it, you can see that it's a recolored curve. So I will actually a lot of times do this. Where are my controllers for my... Did I make hip controllers? That's awkward. I don't think I did. Oh, I did. They're just absurdly tiny. Huzzah! I will make those larger so I can see them through my legs. Alright, so... I don't know, maybe something like that. Doesn't really matter. So a lot of times what I'll do is sort of go through and just color things so I can see them a little bit more clearly. So again, display, drawing overrides, and this is completely optional. So a lot of times I'll start with sort of like red. I do try to choose colors that don't show up in the normal selection of curves. So like a lot of times this I just sort of, it's not hard to see, but it's like kind of hard to see, but I'll avoid this green color, or like if you shift select a curve, this one turns white. So I usually will try to avoid white or green, because again, it just makes selecting things, cat, a little bit more confusing, because you're like unsure of whether it's actually selected or not. So I'll find yellow, ouch, there's a cat clawing my stomach, yellow, and a lot of times I'll just sort of end on kind of whatever, or this horrendous pinky color, just because it's there. purely because it's there. I really don't like that color, it's gross. And I will find these other controllers and scale them up again so I like seeing the controllers I put in, that's always helpful. And then I'll sort of randomly make these. I might just leave them blue, what the heck. So if you want, you can recolor that in whatever way makes it easier for you to see. A lot of times I will sort of go ahead and do that for like spine chains, anything where there's lots of different, that is a really hard red to see. Brighter one somewhere. I didn't realize, I'm like a little bit weird when I recolor these. I'm like, they all need to be the same red and they all need to have all these weird, I get kind of crazy about it. Yes, purely aesthetics. I do think it makes it easier to work with. So I'm just going to kind of go through and do that. I'm just going to let the video run so you can just sort of cycle through if you scroll through to when I've stopped doing this, basically. Don't want to change that one. I'm gonna hide my skeleton and okay. Hide that, make these all significantly larger. Yeah, I just like being able to see what I can do, what I'm doing. It's always fun. Alright, and I've decided that I would find it infinitely less irritating to add in new joints than I would to recolor all of these individually. A lot of times if I'm thinking ahead, I will actually recolor the joints before I make them, so I will only need to do it once for each color I want. I was not thinking ahead. So, what I'm going to do is just pretty much delete all of these. I'm going to go ahead and parent that. So if I grab this one, it's going to grab both, and I'll just repopulate these guys and make sure that this one is down here. And pretty much that's the thing. So this is my crazy colored rig. And I will show you in the... I think I'm going to do at least 3 more videos. One with the basic FK setup. It's going to be like the easiest thing to do. The next is going to be an IK setup, and then there's going to be another one where I go over doing the sort of automated switch in Maya for that IK FK setup. In the meantime, I'm still just going to let this run in case anyone finds it cathartic to just like watch me label joints, in which case probably re-examine your life choices, but whatever. But yeah, so I literally am just going to sit here and relabel joints for a while. I think the root control is the one thing I will actually label root control. Chest. It's not an ankle, that's a thing. Oh! Alright. Apparently I'm a little punchy right now. What did I say this finger was? The ring finger? No! Oh my god, what have I done? Save my file because I'm paranoid. I don't know what I did. Neck. Head. Oh. this is the worst part of rigging. One day I'm going to figure out how to automate this, and it will be glorious. I'm fairly certain this has also only taken me about 2 minutes to do, and it feels like I've been doing this for an hour. Relabeling joints is my least favorite thing ever, and I also make typos, and then I perpetuate them, and it makes me sad. Alright. So I'm like 80% sure that I've relabeled all of these things with logical names. Yeah, I'm gonna punk out now because I feel like I said this video was over and I don't want people to miss stuff. So I'll see you again in 30 seconds.